Welcome to The Beat. Our top story is this bombshell whistleblower complaint rocking the Trump DOJ and administration. It alleges a top Trump official said the DOJ could plot to tell the courts, F you, and ignore judicial orders that the president didn't like, which is what happens in autocratic regimes. This is a new, damning account of an assault on the rule of law. It comes from a very solid source, a longtime DOJ attorney who was in the room, who worked directly for these Trump appointees, who witnessed them firsthand knowledge, strong testimony. And this individual recounts how his refusal to lie led him to be later ousted. The source is a detailed, meticulous complaint. This is not one quote or one interview. It is now a formal process, not unlike other whistleblowers that we've covered throughout many decades in American life. And whistleblowers, even in this current Trump era, even if he didn't like it and wants it to be otherwise, are legally protected. Indeed, that's one of the reasons this is news tonight, which we'll get into, because the written complaint has been provided to Congress and the public. And it's leading to these kind of bombshell New York Times headlines. Justice Department leader suggested violating court orders, whistleblower says. The confession here is from the top of the Justice Department. The now fired DOJ lawyer, Erez Raveni, writing about this with the emails and documents, contemporaneous accounts, as the lawyers say, to back him up. So while some people might have thought this is where Trump wanted to go or assumed his senior aides were trying to do this at DOJ, I can tell you, as a lawyer, as a legal journalist, as someone following this all these times, all these months, this is the most damning inside account that they did deliberately want to violate court orders, according to the whistleblower. Comes down to a senior Justice Department official, Emil Bove, also a former Trump criminal defense lawyer, who told subordinates that he would, in this clash, potentially ignore these court orders to get whatever Trump wanted. Judges be damned. The Constitution be damned. And that means, in the end, democracy and the rule of law be damned, because everything we do as a country, and one thing that's always separated the United States from many other less democratic countries, is that the rule of law holds. That's why when there are disputes, like a famous one you've heard of, Bush v. Gore, and the election didn't resolve it necessarily clearly, instead of turning to violence in the streets or a military coup, which is quite common in many countries, when the Supreme Court rules, people followed it. That included the people who benefited, say in that case, Bush, but also everyone, half the country, who didn't benefit, who wanted the other side, people supporting Gore. That was a quarter century ago, 25 years ago. We didn't have big open questions about whether the government would follow the rules and the law, whether the court order would be followed, and whether there'd be violence. Tonight, I'm telling you, not to alarm you, but to make sure you understand what's happening out there, that is not so certain under these Trump officials. Some of them seeking even more power after now being busted today for admitting their view is FU. Now, in the immigration clash where Bove reportedly said this, quote, DOJ would need to consider telling the courts FU, and he said the whole thing, and ignore any such court order. I'm going to show you more of these details, because the whistleblower recounts that then the others in the room, some longtime DOJ officials, some who might be sympathetic to Trump's deportation goals, quote, looked stunned. And they observed awkward, nervous glances among people in the room. Silence overtook the room. That's the senior DOJ official telling DOJ lawyers, ignore the rule of law and the orders if you need to, and to put a little extra on it, FU to the courts, to the judges. Now, this was a key part of the Trump administration's deportation agenda, which everyone can see is one of the places where they want to do the most quickly, but also are testing legal powers, saying we're at war, saying there's rebellion or invasion, and apparently saying if they don't get what they want, well, they've got some people in place who'll get there however they need to. You see the then defendant Trump flanked by this person. It's very controversial that Trump has put in so many individuals who were part of his personal legal team to run the country. And the allegation, the whistleblower complaint, is that's not working out very well. That same individual's up for a big judgeship nominated by Trump. This is a clue to the kind of people that Trump wants on the courts. Whether he would want his own orders disobeyed if he got in there is a separate question. But of course, the whole point is they want to control this in a way where there are no actual binding court orders against them. And if they stack the courts, then they don't have to worry about that. And that's the whistleblower's contention, that this is lawless. Now, we're talking about whether they're going to get somewhere ending the rule of law or breaking the Constitution to get autocratic results any which way they want. You should recall Trump actually lost the key SCOTUS round in this case at the center of the whistleblower's account. And the Trump administration has been under scrutiny exactly along these lines. We've heard a more sanitized or kind of vague version of this, not with an FU, mind you. But what's important is today's evidence adds to the view, the very damning account, that there has been a coordinated strategy from the top to soften up, chip away at the rule of law and the courts in this country so that someday they may just ignore them entirely.
I believe there was a court order that upheld, which has now been, I think, correctly repudiated by virtually everyone, a court order that upheld the internment of Japanese civilians in
As bad as
internment
it
camps
was
during.
as bad as it was, that court order was followed for years, was it not?
And I just wonder whether some historians might think we'd be better off if it hadn't been followed.
That's what it sounds like on the record. That's a top Trump lawyer as well, who's at DOJ, saying, I wonder if it'd be better not to follow. Now we're learning, when you match that up behind the scenes, other DOJ officials at the top, which Trump is now trying to promote, are saying, yeah, F you, that's exactly what we want to do. When sometimes people say, is it alarmist to talk about autocratic instincts in the Trump administration? The problem is alarmist misses the whole issue. They're the ones admitting it and saying it. It's almost like their defenders want to wish or pretend they don't admit that the plan is to not follow court orders you don't like. Now, this whistleblower says his boss asked him effectively to lie, and he had to choose between what was basically an unlawful instruction and what normally judges and lawyers could be disbarred for, right? Committing perjury in court, risking his job or more, and he chose to take the risk. It's a bombshell allegation, a blatant discussion of defying court orders. If this proves to be true, and the lawyer here has written it down on good faith after being ousted, taking great personal risk, this is what we call a pretty credible account, then you can't put this up on your screen or on the internet enough for people to understand that the autocratic threat is admitted, an FU to court oversight. And if the administration can get away with this, let me be clear with you tonight, it's bigger than an immigration case or policies. It is how you plot to end the rule of law. Judges are supposed to be the backstop. We hear about that on a ton of issues. Where can the National Guard go? What are the war powers? Are some immigrants being mistreated in a way where they need to be better provided due process? But if they end judicial oversight completely, well, you won't have elections and democracy itself. I'm joined by Andrew Weissmann, a longtime DOJ vet, FBI general counsel, prosecutor. How do you view the significance and the credibility of this whistleblower account?
Sure. Well, if the whistleblower is to be believed, it is what you are saying, which is this is an insider account of the end of the rule of law. I mean, there's no two ways to sugarcoat this. I want to make sure people understand who this whistleblower is.
Mhm.
This is not some political hack or disgruntled employee. This is somebody who was at the department for 15 years. He was in the immigration field. He was most recently promoted to his position and lauded by the Trump administration itself. And he takes pains to point out that he supported and advocated in court many policies that I think a lot of your viewers would find deplorable. In other words, he was one of the people who defended the so-called Muslim ban in the Trump 1.0 administration. So he is no sort of, lily-livered, MSNBC Democrat, whatever, epithet somebody wants to call him. And he recounts that Stephen Miller has used those epithets in disparaging him. This is somebody who is a true insider, and he ends his 35-page complaint by saying, I didn't sign up to lie.
Mhm.
And he recounts over and over again ways in which numerous cases in which judges are holding contempt proceedings currently, He recounts how this administration either made false statements or decided, as you noted in fairly vulgar language, decided to just not comply with court orders. Many of my colleagues who are, sort of career Republicans, career Democrats who serve in the Department of Justice would be equally appalled at that. This is not a partisan issue. You do not react to the courts that way because at the end of the day, it's not just the rule of law. There are people whose lives were affected. There are people who were removed in violation of court order, who were extracted, whose rights were violated. Remember, the Supreme Court determined 9-0 that the due process rights of the people in El Salvador were extracted by the Trump administration, were violated. That is what this whistleblower is getting at, is the inside story of how that happened and his efforts to get the administration to comply with the law.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge deal. It's clearly the most significant whistleblower report we have in this young administration of the second term. There are whistleblowers like Vindman, who people may remember, that have actually caused a larger investigative process. I want to ask you, where does this lead? It's only through the laws that still hold that Congress has this thing. I mean, he's been ousted. He's done it through the whistleblower protection process. He's, as you mentioned, a skilled, longtime lawyer, so he knows a bit more about that and saving evidence. He also says in this complaint, they were saying, hey, let's not have evidence. Call on the phone. Stop with the emails, which looks pretty sinister, or at least looks bad if all you're trying to do is normal internal court work that's privilege. So I want to ask you where this leads, Andrew. I know you've agreed to stay. We have a quick 90-second break, and then Andrew tells us where we're headed. We're back covering this shocking whistleblower complaint from deep inside the DOJ. DOJ veteran Andrew Weissmann is here with us, and he's about to tell us where this leads. I want to give viewers a few more details. I talked about how this is an autocratic plot. When you dive into the actual issues, you can see how this also fits immigration, which is the issue where the Trump administration and DOJ have tried to test their powers the most. Indeed, the Supreme Court has just made some of the deportation plans easier, offering a glide path that 3 justices dissented on, noting a related issue, that it appears the DOJ has repeatedly, quote, defied emergency relief ordered by the government. In other words, aspects of court orders. And this now fired attorney, Erez Raveni, has basically said he has the receipts, the evidence that this top DOJ official, Emil Bove, ordered people there to flout the court orders. And even then to cover their tracks, you've always heard it's the cover-up, telling subordinates they may have to just lie in court or obfuscate or just be untruthful to cover their tracks. The big line that you can't get enough of is a top DOJ official saying the court should be told F you. He's got a hearing tomorrow. I'm sure he'll be asked about that. But this goes back to March, when they tried to seize wartime powers, the Alien Enemies Act, to do extra deportations. And a judge at the time was pressing DOJ on those flights. You may recall this whole back and forth. The DOJ attorney said they didn't know if there were more imminent deportations. Well, today, what we know now, according to the whistleblower, is that itself wasn't true, that the DOJ attorney had actually been in the prior day's meeting. You don't forget the big meeting the day before, when this same official, Bove, said the planes would be taking off that weekend no matter what. Planes leaving imminently. From the bench, the judge then ordered those planes to be returned to the U.S. And we knew this lawyer's name at the time before he became this official whistleblower. Raveni said the attempts to reach state officials about that were ignored and, quote, we need to address this ASAP to avoid contempt of court. He was warning them, and that he believes DHS got basically contrary directions, violating court orders. Then days later, it was Raveni at a hearing who talked about how the government was not going to answer the court's questions, that he was instructed not to provide information about when the flights took off. In other words, hiding the apparent fact of ongoing violation of a lower court order not to let the flights take off. Everyone remembers what came next if you follow the news, because it became such a big black eye and embarrassment for the Trump administration. This individual, Garcia, mistakenly deported to El Salvador. Raveni made headlines back then because he was the one actually who, as NBC and other outlets reported at the time, said, yes, it was a mistake to deport Garcia. Raveni recalling in this whistleblower complaint And he was told to actually sign a brief that said Garcia was a terrorist. That was the kind of thing they wanted to do to basically deal with the mistake. And that's when he refused, saying, after defending so many other cases, which our guest mentioned, quote, "I didn't sign up to lie." Andrew Weissman is back with us. I wanted to give people that reminder, Andrew, because the headline is autocratic FU. The details are in a case where they made a mistake, they lost, and it was this very lawyer, news junkies may remember, who did make the honest admission in court. So give us your thoughts both on what you were going to tell us, how we deal with a whistleblower complaint in Congress, and the immigration details we just mentioned.
Sure. Well, in a normal time, you have three separate groups that would be looking at this. Congress would look at it, the Department of Justice would look at it, and the courts would look at it. So the only one that you can be pretty sure will go forward is the courts because they are independent. And the district courts are already looking into contempt of court. And this is huge ammunition. Obviously, it has to be proved. We have only one side,
Yep.
but as we've talked about, it has certainly it appears to be quite a credible source, and there are a lot of references to receipts. That is. Text messages, emails, and numbers of people being involved. So you can imagine the courts getting involved and wanting to know more because they're already looking at this because this is not an isolated instance. This is something that for most viewers, they're going, I knew this must have been what was going on because you don't have a normal situation where courts are looking into contempt of court by the Department of Justice. That is a group that doesn't commit contempt in any normal administration, Republican or Democratic. Congress should be looking at it, but I'd like to focus on the Department of Justice. At any Department of Justice, if you had serious allegations like this, the Attorney General of the United States has now been given information that a senior official and other people at the department, up to this is Emil Bove is the number 2 to the number 2, the PAYDAG. It is a very, very important position.
Yeah.
Normally, the department would be looking into this chapter and verse. And this complaint went to the inspector general. Well, you know what? It's time for the inspector general to be taking all of these complaints, and this is just the latest, seriously. What does it mean to be the inspector general when you have numerous people at the Department of Justice quitting over
Yeah.
what they say is improper?
And that's, I'm going to jump in. That's Horowitz, right?
Michael Horowitz, yes.
And Trump held him over because Trump has his reasons and said he's one of the ones that wasn't purged. They purged a lot of IGs. Is it incumbent on Horowitz here, if he means anything about his job, to look into the biggest scandal bombshell here seriously? Or does it raise questions over whether Trump held him over because he's not going to look at this the way they used to look into the Comey issues and other things that while important, weren't this?
Well, this is a test of that. This is one where you either do your job, and if you lose your job over it, so be it. But you've taken an oath of office. I should note that is one of the things that is said in this complaint, which is that Mr. Ravenny took his oath of office seriously to follow the law and to be candid to the court and to do justice. And he says now it's time for the people receiving this complaint to honor their oath of office. And Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, it's incumbent on him to do it. The worst that happens is he gets fired. So what? He has a job to do here.
Let me show you one more thing because I want to put up some of the past whistleblowers. This individual was at the center of the Garcia case, so people might remember that. But we have photos of some of the past whistleblowers to remind people that there are folks who, at great personal risk, Vindman was the whistleblower complaint on Ukraine, a country still in the news, that led to the entire impeachment and new questions about foreign policy. Dr. Hill spoke out despite great personal threats from the then President Trump. We have whistleblowers throughout history. These are some of the DOJ lawyers we heard from. I want to play the lawyers that we heard from in the Jan 6 case, Andrew, because it was, again, this pattern, Trump pushing, sometimes reaching deep into the bureaucracy himself or through aides to see if people could do what, again, this whistleblower says he would not do, which is lie in court. Take a listen.
Pat Cipollone said, yeah, this is a murder-suicide pact.
I'm going to resign immediately. The president immediately turned to Mr. Engel, and he said, Steve, you wouldn't resign, would you? And he said, absolutely, I would, Mr. President. You could have hundreds and hundreds of resignations of the leadership of your entire Justice Department. Jeff Clark would be left leading a graveyard.
Congress, under the Republicans, may not be interested. The Democrats don't have full subpoena power, but should they convene some process to at least get in willing witnesses on this and other issues? Because again, like you, Andrew, I try to follow just the evidence. That's what lawyers and journalists tend to do, or one overlap we have, right? But I don't want to be alarmist when I say if they're already doing this on immigration, if the president's testing on National Guard, we have Marines in the streets, it's not far-fetched to imagine leading up to an election, there being a situation where they're doing things like Trump did after losing the 2020 election that could interfere with the right to vote. And if courts say no, they've laid a groundwork to say no to that.
Absolutely. So it's right to think about this is maybe, in fact, it's the tip of the iceberg. One benefit that the Democrats may have in Congress is that Emil Bove, as you noted, is nominated to be a circuit judge, and his hearing is upcoming. That means that everyone at that hearing gets to ask questions, and you can be sure that these allegations, and I should note, other allegations about Mr. Bove that other people who worked with him in the Southern District of New York are raising, are fair game at those hearings. So there is a vehicle for people in Congress to raise those questions, even though they're in the minority and don't have sort of direct subpoena power.
Yeah, all really important. Andrew Weissmann across two segments here on the Bombshell Story. Thank you. Coming up tonight, Trump's approval is sagging in polls. Republicans concerned about the health care cuts in the budget.
I've been pretty clear that when it comes to Medicaid, those cuts that would harm Alaskan beneficiaries, that's not something that I can take home, right?
And tonight, we're going to peel back the lemon. Don Lemon is here on the beat. We're going to get into everything with him, my special guest by the end of the hour, and former NATO commander Wesley Clark, as we try to make sense of this tenuous ceasefire announcement. Next. There have been some steps in the U.S. campaign against Iran and the announcement of a potential ceasefire, but there's also new questions about how much the U.S. has really achieved. Indeed, Donald Trump went big and said that the U.S. strikes, quote, obliterated Iran's nuclear program. But that's not really how these things work. You have to go to intel, and this can take time. But according to newly leaked classified intel from the U.S., the attack actually did less than the president rushed to proclaim. And remember, lying about or misleading about Middle Eastern intelligence is quite a big deal in the U.S. It's something Trump criticized the Bush administration for. Well, the New York Times account of that intel, which we don't have here, we haven't looked at it ourselves, does say it actually set it back a few months. I'll just read you what it says. Classified findings indicating the attack sealed off the entrance to those two facilities, but did not collapse their underground buildings. The bunker busters busted, but apparently not the whole bunker. The White House under Trump is saying the account of this assessment is, quote, wrong. As for that fragile ceasefire, which Trump did try to announce online last night, not clear whether it will hold. This morning, each side actually accused each other of breaking what was then a young, sort of nascent ceasefire. Trump very upset about this. Now, there are different ways to do diplomacy, but what we saw from him today was unlike almost anything we've seen in any modern era from any sitting president about a matter that is, for many people, of course, potentially life and death. We're actually going to air this once in our hour without any editing or sanitizing. This is what the president said.
These guys got to calm down. Ridiculous. We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
That's the president. Whether his ire was higher because he personally announced this ceasefire and held it out as a potential Trump win and then found within hours it wasn't, or whether something else made him get into this format, we don't exactly know. What we do know is what he heralded as a mutual and firm ceasefire is being tested right now. A lot of people in the region, and certainly in the United States, do hope that it holds, hope that what Trump announced ultimately proves basically true and durable. We're joined by General Wesley Clark, retired 4-star Army general, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, a former candidate known to many in these policy circles and, of course, to many voters. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Your thought on the president expressing himself that way and his hopes that the ceasefire he rushed to announce in untraditional terms may yet hold?
Well, he was frustrated, but I think it's a good thing we've got a ceasefire. The question is now, what next? You know, we've had actions for the last 70 years in the Middle East, and Israel and the United States have always been successful, almost always. We never militarily successful. We defeated, and Israel is defeated. First at the independence, Israel, Syria, and Jordan in 1967, saving Israel from Syria and Egypt in 1973, going into Lebanon in 82, going after the Palestinians when they were in Tunisia in 1985. Every time Israel does these things, it's always amazing. And the United States has also been amazing. 1991, the 4-day war, really, that kicked Saddam out of Kuwait, and how we got to Baghdad in 2003. But here's the big but. That's not the end of the story.
Right.
It's what you do with the military power of the United States. And there we always seem to be lacking in some way. We either don't have the allies, don't have the resources, don't have the idea, don't have the concept. Really, if you look at it, President Clinton had 2 successful engagements with peace that stuck. One was Northern Ireland, one was in Bosnia. And later we finished that off in Kosovo. But since the turn of the century, since 9/11, really, there's been a lot of military action, but not a lot of successful follow-up to really cap the win with diplomatic achievement and peace.
What do you think of the leaked intel that suggests this was a step, but not the end or obliteration of the nuclear program?
You know, first reports they're always wrong in some way. This is a first report. It may be that we did more damage than what the Defense Intelligence Agency thinks, but also we shouldn't underestimate the sly, wily Iranians. And we've been talking about Fordo on television worldwide for a week. Do we really think that they would just sit there and say, gee, I hope the Americans don't do anything?
Yeah.
No, they would have taken as much as they could out of Fordo, and they may well have had other secret sites that they didn't share with the IAEA. It's the way
And
the uranium.
you sound somewhat sympathetic to President Trump here. Is that because you broadly agree with the policies, or you think that these are hard jobs?
I think it's a matter of following through with it right now. We've got to do what we need to do with Israel and with Iran and with partners in the region. Iran needs to give up on the effort to destroy Israel. It's really not about, I mean, it's important that we run down their nuclear weapons. We don't want them to have a nuclear weapon, obviously. But that's a cat and mouse game that could take thousands of troops for years in Iran. It's a big country, 2.5 times the size of Texas. What we really want is Iran to say, okay, we've been doing this for 40 some odd years. Let's live and let live in this region. That's what's needed. And with that and the right confidence building measures, we could create a much more harmonious region. Israel, of course, also has some obligations. It can't treat the Palestinians like they're going to go away. They're not going to go away. So you've got to treat them reasonably and humanely and take away the pretext for violence in the region.
Yeah. All good points on complex issues. We thank you, General Clark. Appreciate it. Coming up, journalist Don Lemon is on the beat tonight. We got so much to get into, and Trump's approval tanking with this budget up in the air when we come back. Look who's here. Not a guest host, but the veteran anchor, Don Lemon, longtime journalist, Emmy winner. Of course, veteran of CNN, now hosts the Don Lemon Show. He's interviewed everyone from Neil deGrasse Tyson to Elon Musk to Donald Trump. He has his second memoir out, I Once Was Lost, My Search for God in America, and he's our special guest on The Beat tonight. Welcome.
How you doing, man?
Great to see you.
Always good to see you. We go way back. You know,
I've known you a long
Did I
time.
tell you how? You know how long I've known you?
How long?
God, it was years ago. I was filling in for Elliot Spitzer on CNN. His show. It was Parker Spitzer, but then it became Spitzer. And you and Nicole Wallace
True.
were my guests.
True, I was on with Nicole and you. I
Yes.
remember that.
And I was anchoring and interviewing you and Nicole. And now look at us.
Look at life.
Yeah. You two are here, and I'm no longer at CNN. I'm here.
You're no longer at CNN. I want to ask you about that. I want to ask you about your life. And I want to ask you what I told viewers we're going to talk about, which is Trump's double standard.
Yeah.
But let's start with your book. I want to make sure people know about it.
Sure.
You, in the book, among other things, talk about how Ice Cube has something in common with MAGA bros. That spoke to us. So reading from I Once Was Lost,
Yeah.
you say these right-wing power mongers conflate religious zeal with patriotism. Then they conflate patriotism with nationalism, Lemon writes. Quote, with a charismatic wannabe despot as their frontman.
Yeah.
They sample the Bible and the Constitution the way Ice Cube samples the Isley Brothers, and it was a good day.
There you go.
You hear it in there, but it's a whole new jam.
They do. They sample.
What do you
it.
mean?
Well, I mean, they sample it, but they don't really. They don't get the full meaning of what it is. They're just using words, right? Not that Ice Cube does that. I'm not saying that, but that's. I'm using that as an example of how they don't really take what the Bible and what Christianity and what God is supposed to be about seriously. It has become what they want it to be about, and so they pick and choose. You know, this is nothing new. They pick and choose different verses and things from the Bible to go along with what they want. And it's been happening a lot more now, especially with Donald Trump.
And
Who's
you
become a deity.
Yeah, well, exactly. You care about faith, and
Yeah.
it's a rich part of culture, but you're concerned that faith is being transposed into what? Some sort of partisan mission?
Well, they're trying to make us into a theocracy, which was the whole reason behind the book. You've been seeing this, you've been covering it for a long time, but I think it's even more so now. It's on steroids with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not just the president of the United States. He has become, especially after Butler, Pennsylvania, he has become a martyr. And instead of surviving, an alleged attempt, he has become really, it's about a resurrection now. And he has been chosen by God to lead America and lead the world. And considering what has happened since the 1970s and 1980s with the moral majority and the religious right and pushing religion into politics, it is even more so dangerous, more so dangerous for our country. I mean, look at what Ted Cruz said the other day, that he came to Washington with an express interest to do what? To support Israel, which is about,
Right, he spoke about it in messianic terms. You want to get into that? Well,
which is about religion, right? And
you know how this works, Don.
we're not supposed to do that.
You know how this works around
Yeah.
here because
How
you've been
does it?
doing it a long time.
All right, let's go.
Let's roll the tape.
There
Ted
we go.
Cruz.
I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of it, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
So you're saying we should be skeptical of people who want a theocratic foreign policy and want other people to serve and maybe die for it.
I'm saying something, yes, but I'm saying something very simple.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be a separation of church and state. We're not supposed to be governing based on religious values or what the Bible says. That should be frightening. And I am a believer. I'd say I'm a believer. I am a Christian. But I do believe in the separation of church and state. And I don't think that I should be pushing my religion, my values onto laws in this country, especially if I'm a lawmaker.
Let me turn to something that I know people want to hear you on,
Yes,
because
sir.
people like that you keep it a buck, right? We're going to get Dawn. We're going to get what you think, right?
You're blacker than me.
I don't have a comment on that. I have no comment on that. Wow, you left me speechless.
You keep it a buck.
On live TV. You keep it a buck.
All right.
People know we're going to get the real, right?
Yes. The real.
There is a double standard. Donald Trump benefits from it from the traditional media, which you've been a part of,
Yes.
and the digital media, which you're now a new leader in. The president before him, Barack Obama, said something about this recently. I want to play. Take a look.
Imagine if I had done any of this. Imagine if I had pulled Fox News' credentials from the White House press corps. Imagine if I'd said to law firms that were representing parties that were upset with policies my administration had initiated, that you will not be allowed into government buildings. It's unimaginable that the same parties that are silent now would have tolerated behavior like that from me.
Is he right? Is there a double standard?
Of course, there's a double standard. Yeah, there's a double standard for him, and there's a double standard for women. Yeah, it's a double standard. I mean, just imagine Donald Trump doing half of the things. Imagine, Barack Obama doing half the things Donald Trump does. Imagine Barack Obama saying the F word
today.
Oh my gosh! Do you remember when he put his feet up on the Resolute desk and oh my gosh, he's disrespecting the Oval Office? Donald Trump disrespects the Oval Office and the presidency every single day. Now imagine if Barack Obama had stood in front of Marine One and reporters and said, the F bomb.
Or if
What would have happened?
or to carry it out, if Barack Obama insisted on his family or his children profiting off the presidency, selling access, selling crypto, there would have been like impeachment.
But they already, even for his books, two of which I think he wrote, maybe both of them before he was in the White House, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And they talked about
Prince, my
him
father, sure.
profiting off of that. So imagine if he had his kids overseas making billions of dollars off his businesses. Imagine that. Yeah, and even now they criticize him for making money. He likes to be seen with rich people. You've heard the whole thing.
Yeah.
He loves partying with the rich.
And
he's not president anymore. Who cares?
And new media is interesting. It brings in
Yes.
voices. You're now here experimenting in that, but I think new media and some of the pods also give Trump a double standard here.
Well, it's about clicks for a lot of it, but also remember in new media, like you have editorial standards here. You have to go through standards.
Yeah, we try.
practices. You
We
have
hope
to-
so.
You have to tell the truth, and if you don't, then you have to correct it and or apologize for it. You don't have to do that in new media. There are no such gatekeepers there doing that, and the folks who've been really successful in this. In the new media are people who can shape their own reality, who don't abide by the truth, who can just say whatever they want, and that's tough coming from a traditional
Interesting.
old school journalistic background.
Yeah, and there's like many situations, there's greatness and elements of both.
Yes.
But we come out of a fact-checking environment. You don't just publish it first and then see what happens.
Yeah, that you had to give someone a warning that someone's going to say the F bomb is just completely foreign to me right now because I was
Right.
like, okay, so he said the F bomb.
Oh, right, the warning.
The warning. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I want to go lemon lightning round.
Lemon
This is
lightning.
fast.
Yeah.
Favorite moment in your time on live TV?
With Simone Sanders, who's here talking about Black History Month in Omarosa.
Respect.
Yeah.
A journalist or interviewer that you studied or looked up to in your early days?
Besides Ari Melber, Bryant. Bryant's a dear friend, Bryant
Sure.
Gumbel. Yeah. And actually Peter Jennings. Smooth, both of them. Smooth.
You've been at this a minute, as we say.
Yeah.
Favorite person you interviewed? To interview.
Ooh, my favorite person to interview. Wow. That's a good one. You know what? Who I really liked interviewing? Joe Biden. Good guy. Now, he went back on one thing. He promised to officiate my wedding and it didn't happen.
Did he?
Yeah, he did.
Interesting.
Oh, well, I think I fell out of favor with him.
That can happen. Finish this sentence. One thing I learned being outside of traditional media instead of inside.
That everyone is so myopic in traditional media. You think everyone is watching you and the world is paying attention when they're really not.
I know that's right.
Yeah.
Journalism means?
Journalism means having a backbone and without fear or favor and not kowtowing to, especially now, to an administration. And that sometimes means standing up against your bosses and saying,
Sure.
you cannot do this. And then you have to be willing to sacrifice something because you take an oath. And journalists are protecting the very first amendment of the Constitution.
We respect our colleagues. I'm curious, at its best, to you, CNN means?
Oh, incomparable international news coverage.
Sometimes the press still doesn't get that.
That they have the power to shape elections and the world.
Final three. Failure.
Lives.
Failure means?
Failure means giving up. And failure also means believing what your critics say about you, the criticism of people who don't like you anyway. So it doesn't matter. That's what failure means.
Success means?
Sitting on an anchor desk at MSNBC
Hey.
with Ari Melber.
Respect.
Yeah.
The last one's simple. Being named Lemon has meant
being named Lemon has meant it's meant the world to me. I mean, look, check this out. This is a shameless plug.
I set it up.
My name is Lemon Live at 5. You got to watch
Lemon Live at 5.
Lemon Live at 5.
Having an interesting, memorable name has been good for you.
It has been, because people could just call me Lemon, or they call me D Lemon. But the interesting thing is that they rarely just use my first name. It's always Don Lemon. So
yeah,
it kind of goes. So
and the allegories are there because the lemon is fresh and memorable, but what you add to it can change everything.
Yeah. You can add lemon water every morning. That's why I look the way I do, and you look as young as you do.
Shout out to Lemon Water. The book is I Once Was Lost. We'll be right back.